Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Continuing to focus on national security, after we finish the FISA debate this afternoon, we're going to turn to the National Defense Authorization Act. We will not have to get the motion to proceed, so we'll be on that bill starting tomorrow. It'll be open for amendment. We think it's important to focus on the national defense because of all the threats that are occurring these days, which is a very, very high threat level, as you already know. In wrapping up the current issue, let me call on the chairman of the Intelligence Committee to give you the state of play on that. And then I'm going to turn to Senator Fisher, a member of the Armed Services Committee, to make a few observations about armed services, and then we'll hear from some of the other members of our elected leadership. Chairman Burr.
Thank you, Leader. Shortly, we'll have an opportunity to improve the USA Freedom Act with one substitute amendment, which will incorporate all of the USA Freedom language with two changes. One will require the telecoms to give a 6-month notification of any change in the retention program of their data. Two will require the Director of National Intelligence to certify at the end of the transition period that we can successfully make the transition without interruption to the program. There'll be two amendments. One's a first degree that will extend the transition period from 6 months to 12 months. And the second one will make a change to the amicus or friend of the court language that would no longer make it mandatory to the FISA court. It would make it the same as it is in the rest of the court system. My hope is that my colleagues will take the opportunity to do what I think is improve the bill in a very rational, reasonable way. But this certainly does not present any poison pills that would kill this bill. It would require it to go back to the House, and I think it could get a quick action in the House. We'll see what the will of the United States Senate is in a few minutes. Thanks.
Well, I'm honored to serve on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and as a member of that committee, I was able to contribute to a bipartisan NDAA this year. First of all, I'd like to thank our chairman, Senator McCain. He did a really, really fine job in putting together what he likes to call a reform bill. And with the NDAA this year, we are looking at reforming the acquisition system. We're cutting spending to some troubled programs like the IT program. We're looking at making some significant cuts to the Pentagon bureaucracy with headquarter staff and management there, 7.5% in cuts to that program. So we're looking at saving about $10 billion, and that money is going to be redirected and going to meet the critical needs of our war fighters. That's what we're supposed to be doing with an NDAA. We need to focus on our military, our personnel, and make sure that they have the resources that they need so that they can complete the missions that they're tasked with. So I'm looking forward to having a robust discussion. The leader has promised us on the floor of the Senate. We'll begin that, I believe, later this week. Tomorrow. We begin that tomorrow. We're going to have that open amendment process. So I'm excited to go through that and be able to have that good debate that we owe the citizens of this country.
Well, as you've heard this afternoon, the Senate will vote to reauthorize certain key provisions of the Patriot Act that are designed to detect and intercept threats to the American homeland. I'm reminded of the comments of FBI Director Comey that in all 56 field offices for the FBI, there are open inquiries with regard to homegrown terrorism. And of course, this struck close to home for me in Texas a few weeks ago when two men traveled from Phoenix, Arizona, and wearing full body armor and carrying automatic weapons proceeded to try to shoot up a showing of some cartoons where people are exercising their First Amendment rights. This is the nature of the threat, and we don't need to be raising the risk level for the American people by giving up tools that respect their civil liberties, but also at the same time make sure the government can do what it needs to do, not to just prosecute crimes after they occur, but to stop them before they occur in the first place.
with everything going on around here, it maybe escaped some people's notice that last quarter it was reported that the economy actually shrank by 0.7%. So not only we're not seeing growth, we're actually seeing a contraction. And 40% of the people who are unemployed have completely stopped looking for work. So things in the economy aren't very good. It's the slowest recovery in the last 70 years. We've only been growing at 2.2% since the recovery ended. It's clear that the administration's top-down policies are not getting the job done, whether it's Obamacare or Dodd-Frank. Everything that this administration has done in terms of policies is making it more difficult, more expensive to create jobs. And in fact, only a 1 percentage point increase in the growth rate over what is expected means an additional 9.5 million jobs and $9,000 in higher wages for people across this country and $3 trillion off of the debt over a 10-year period. So what we ought to be doing around here when we're looking at all these policies and things that we do here in Congress and what the administration does, if we're serious about changing the trajectory in the economy, is asking the question, what does this do to create jobs? What does this do to create greater growth in the economy? And if the president is serious about growing the economy, he'll reverse his trend of more government, more regulation, higher taxes, and work with us on policies that actually will create jobs and grow the economy and improve the standard of living for middle-income families in this country.
When the president was promoting his health care law, he said if you like your policy, you can keep your policy, and he said that insurance rates would go down for families all across the country. If you've seen the news yesterday and today, you see that once again it's a promise that the president and the Democrats have made that's been broken. There was a large data dump yesterday where the administration admits there have been requests for double-digit insurance premium increases next year across the country for over 600 different Obamacare health insurance plans. Over 600 different Obamacare insurance plans, double-digit increases across the country next year alone. On average, it's over 20%. And in the president's own home state of Illinois, you're talking about many people paying over 30% more for their premiums next year than they did last year. When you take a look at what's happening for health care all across the country, with these skyrocketing rates, this so-called Affordable Care Act may be one of the most inaccurately named piece of legislation in the history of this country. People are very concerned about this. This is affecting their pocketbook, so not only are they not able to keep their policies that they may have liked, they also can't keep their hard-earned dollars. Later this month, we're going to have a ruling from the Supreme Court on King versus Burwell. If the Supreme Court rules that the president acted illegally, that will give us an opportunity to provide for the American people the care they need from the doctor they choose at lower costs.
I want to follow up on what Senator Fisher said about the National Defense Authorization Act, which we will bring to the floor tomorrow. But let me make a larger point about bipartisanship when it comes to foreign policy and defense issues. Earlier this year, what started off as a partisan exercise in the Foreign Relations Committee became a unanimous statement on behalf of Democrats and Republicans under the leadership of Senator Corker to say to the President of the United States and eventually get him to agree that members of the Congress should look at any agreement that is made with the regime in Iran. I applaud this kind of bipartisan accomplishment. Now, we saw the same thing at the beginning of the negotiations in the Armed Services Committee. We began the week with every Democrat on the committee opposed and every Republican in favor. As Senator McConnell worked through the process, opening up the process, working with Democrats and explaining that we are indeed authorizing national defense at the President's requested level, we were able to end the week on a bipartisan note. Only 4 members voted against the bill in committee. 8 Democrats voted yes, 14 Republicans voted yes. An overwhelming bipartisan statement of support for the President's number, but also for our troops and for national security. I'm confident that we're going to have the same sort of bipartisan, there's no reason for us not to have the same sort of bipartisan support on the floor of the Senate this week for the National Defense Authorization Act that we had out of committee. And again, I think we'll be doing what the American people expect us to do on the foreign policy and national defense issues, putting partisanship aside and moving forward as Americans in a bipartisan fashion. Thank you.
Well, look, this has been the slowest recovery after a deep recession since World War II. Normally, the pattern has been the deeper the recession, the quicker the bounce back. Look at the steps that were taken. Spending, borrowing, taxing, overregulation. All of that has produced a kind of tepid response to this deep recession. The only way we're going to get this country going again and get it growing again is to take the heavy hand of government off in ways that have been extended over the last few years and give people a chance to expand. I had an opportunity to sit down with the National Association of Manufacturers yesterday. Their biggest complaint was overregulation. You see that in healthcare, you see it in financial services, you see it at the EPA, you see it at the NLRB, you name your agency. Every one of these bureaucrats goes to work every day thinking that anybody who is making a profit is up to no good. And if you have that kind of adversarial relationship with the private sector, you don't get growth. And if you don't get growth, you deny future generations the kind of future they deserve. So this country desperately needs to go in a different direction. I think they took a step in changing the Senate last year. We'll see now whether they want to complete the job in 2016. Dana? Yeah.
Saying that you're wrong. So why do you think that you're right about what the House can and cannot do when it comes to making any changes that you?
Well, you're right. It's an uphill battle to be up against Barack Obama, John Conyers, Jim Sensenbrenner, Bob Goodlatte, Mike Lee, and Pat Leahy. On the other hand, and there are a number of us who feel very strongly that this is a significant weakening of the tools that were put in place in the wake of 9/11 to protect the country. And as has been said repeatedly, the public should not be alarmed that anybody's listening to their phone calls. And you know, Dana, I would just like to cite a CNN poll just out today. Yeah. Just to cite a CNN poll out today, I don't have to look at it. I think I remember the results. 60% of the Americans are in favor of the bulk data collection program. So I think Congress is misreading the public mood if they think that Americans are concerned about the privacy implications of this. Let me say again, as other speakers have said repeatedly, nobody's listening to your phone calls. If, on the other hand, you're phone banking somebody in Syria, the authorities are going to the FISA court to get permission, and it's a pretty steep incline they have to get up in order to get permission to listen in to phone calls like that. So some of us feel very strongly about this. I have other members, as you all well know, who are on the other side of this, but there's some of us who feel very strongly about this. And we were not going to simply just roll over and accept the House bill without debating it and attempting to amend it. And Chairman Burr has got what are really quite modest amendments that we hear various members of the House saying, don't change the bill at all. You'd think it was the 10 Commandments. The Senate is entitled to change the bill, and we will try to do that here in a few moments. I'm going to take one more, and then I have to go to the floor. Yeah. Look, I'm not going to start making, you're trying to get me to make a derogatory comment about members of the Senate. I'm not going to do that. I admire and respect them all. We have different points of view on this important issue. Thanks a lot.